Joe Rogan just called out Erika Kirk, and what he found is making millions of people believe she's been planning to become the next First Lady this entire time. The Vice President's wife might be in serious danger, and the evidence is right in front of us. Look, I know this sounds crazy, but stay with me here. At a recent Turning Point event, Erika Kirk stood on stage and said something that made the entire internet stop scrolling. She said no one will ever replace her husband Charlie, but then in the same breath, she compared Vice President J.D. Vance to him. And when J.D. came on stage, what happened next has body language experts, Joe Rogan, and millions of viewers convinced this was all planned from the beginning. In this video, you're going to see the shocking moment that hug happened, and why it's so different from every other hug Erika has given. You'll hear what Joe Rogan actually said about this whole situation, and why he thinks something suspicious is going on. We'll look at the photo of Usha Vance that tells a story words can't explain. And by the end, you'll understand why people are saying J.D. Vance might be going to divorce Usha, marry Erika Kirk, and run for president in 2028 with her as the First Lady. I'm not making this up. The evidence is real, and it's all happening right now. Before we get into the wild stuff, I'm not going to explain what happened to Charlie Kirk, as everyone might already know what happened. Anyway, I'm going to start with this video right away. Now, Charlie Kirk was one of the biggest names in conservative politics. He built Turning Point USA from the ground up. He was only 31 years old, and his wife Erika had to watch the whole thing happen right in front of her eyes, along with their young children. Now, here's where things start to get weird. Within weeks of Charlie's death, Erika Kirk wasn't just grieving quietly at home. She was everywhere. She gave speeches at stadiums. She became the CEO and chairman of Turning Point USA. She started hosting Charlie's podcast. She was doing interviews, attending events, and suddenly became the face of the entire conservative movement that her husband had built. Some people said she was strong. Others said something felt off, but nobody could quite put their finger on what it was, until that moment at the Oxford event with J.D. Vance. Now let me tell you about the other people in this story. J.D. Vance is the current vice president. He's married to a woman named Usha who comes from a Hindu background. They've been married for years and have kids together. But recently, something changed. J.D. has been publicly saying he wants Usha to convert to Christianity. He's been making comments that make Usha look bad, and people close to Usha are saying she's scared about what's coming next. And then there's Joe Rogan, the guy who asks the questions nobody else wants to ask. He looked at this entire situation, at Charlie's death, at Erika's behavior, at that hug with J.D. Vance, and he said out loud what millions were thinking. Something is sus here. Honestly, once you see all the evidence, you're going to understand exactly why Rogan couldn't stay quiet about this. Alright, let's talk about the moment that started this whole thing. Erika Kirk was on stage at a Turning Point event in Oxford. She was there to introduce Vice President J.D. Vance. The crowd was huge, the energy was high, and everyone was expecting a normal political introduction. But what came out of Erika's mouth was anything but normal. She stood at that microphone and said, "No one will ever replace my husband." Okay, that makes sense, right? She's talking about Charlie. But then she kept going. She said,
"No one will ever replace my husband, no. But I do see some similarities of my husband in JD and Vice President J.D. Vance. I do. And that's why I'm so blessed to be able to introduce him tonight, because he understands the fight that we're up against."
Wait, what? Your husband just died a few weeks ago and you're already comparing another man to him? Not just any man either. The Vice President of the United States. A married man. In front of thousands of people and cameras everywhere. The way she said it didn't sound like grief. It sounded planned. It sounded like she had thought about this comparison for a while. And the internet immediately started asking questions. Why would she say that? What similarities is she talking about? And why does she look so comfortable making that statement? People in the comments were going crazy. Some said she was just honoring both men's leadership, but others said this was the first sign that Erika had bigger plans. Plans that involved positioning herself next to J.D. Vance for a reason. I'm not going to lie, when I first heard this clip, I thought maybe people were reading too much into it. But then I saw what happened next, and everything changed. So after Erika made that comparison, J.D. Vance walked onto the stage. The crowd was cheering, music was playing, and he walked right up to Erika to greet her. Now you'd expect a polite, professional hug, right? Maybe a quick side hug, a pat on the back, something respectful. That's not what happened. What happened was a full-body, pelvis-to-pelvis hug that lasted way longer than it should have. Erika's hand didn't just touch his shoulder. It slid up behind his neck, into his hair. Her other hand was on him too. And JD, his hands were on her hips. Not her shoulders, not her back, her hips.
Gotten several requests to decode this video with Erika Kirk and JD Vance. Let's look at JD Vance's side of the hug first. He gives a tight hug with a pat on the back. So some people often pat people on the back. That's just kind of how they manage a longer hug. And for some people, that patting on the back is what they do to comfort someone else. He also rests his hands after the hug for a second on her waist area, which can be a sign of affection and or romantic interest. It's the move to slide her hands up and grasp and cradle his head that is getting so much attention. This is a move that we women do when we are in a deep kiss, which is why it looks so very intimate. Erika then ends her hug by grasping his shoulders, which is a sign of affection and closeness. That said, grief can do really wonky things to humans, but this is wonky for sure. I'm Annie Sarnblad, and I teach microexpressions and all things nonverbal.
Body language experts immediately jumped on this. A woman named Annie Sarnblad broke down the entire interaction, and what she said was shocking. She explained that this kind of physical contact, especially between a married Christian man and a recent widow, was way too intimate. The pelvis-to-pelvis contact, the hand in the hair, the length of the hug, all of it pointed to familiarity that shouldn't exist between these two people. And here's the thing that really got people talking. Erika was smiling during that hug. Not a sad smile, not a thank you for being here smile. A genuine, comfortable smile, like she was happy to be that close to him. Look, I don't want to judge how people grieve. Everyone handles loss differently, but when you're a public figure, when you're hugging the vice president just weeks after your husband's public death, people are going to notice. And what they noticed didn't look like grief. It looked like something else entirely. The internet exploded. Half the people said it was innocent. The other half started connecting dots. And those dots led to a theory that's now gaining millions of believers. Now, while everyone was focused on Erika and JD, there was someone else in that room who saw everything. Usha Vance, JD's wife. And a photo from that event tells a story that words can't fully capture. Someone captured a moment where Usha Vance was hugging Erika Kirk. On the surface, it looks like two women comforting each other. But when you look closer, when you really look at Usha's face, you see something different. You see pain, you see fear, you see a woman who knows something the rest of us don't. One person online said it perfectly. This is one of the most beautiful photos I have seen in a long time. You can feel the hug and see the pain in Usha Vance's eyes as she holds tight to Erika Kirk. Usha's eyes in that photo aren't just sad, they're worried. It's like she's holding on to Erika, but also trying to figure out what's really going on. And based on what we're about to talk about next, Usha had every reason to be concerned.
Here's where things get really interesting. Someone on TikTok decided to do some detective work. They went back through videos of Erika Kirk at other events, hugging other people, and what they found was the smoking gun that proved the JD Vance hug was different. In every other video, when Erika hugs men at events, she keeps her distance. The men barely touch her. They do that awkward hand on the shoulder thing. They keep their hips back. They make it clear that this is professional and nothing more.
Did y'all just see that? Y'all, let me show you this again. Watch his hand.
One clip showed a man hugging Erika, and he literally didn't even touch her back. He kept his hands in the air like he was afraid to make contact. It was so awkward that people were laughing about it in the comments. But here's the thing, that's how a married Christian man should hug a widow, with respect and distance. So if that's how Erika normally hugs people, why was the JD Vance hug so completely different? Why did she let her hand go into his hair? Why was she pressed up against him? Why did it last so long? The answer is simple. That hug with JD Vance wasn't about grief or comfort. It was intentional, it was familiar, and it showed a level of closeness that shouldn't exist between them, especially with his wife standing right there. Honestly, when you watch these videos side by side, it's impossible to deny that something is going on. Now, let me tell you something that makes this even more complicated. After Charlie Kirk died, Usha Vance was one of the people who stayed with Erika. She didn't have to do that. She could have sent a card or flowers like most people. But instead, Usha flew back with Erika on Air Force 2, held her hand, and gave her a shoulder to cry on. Erika even talked about this publicly. She said Usha helped her through the worst moments. She praised Usha for her wisdom and kindness. And here's where it gets weird. Erika used a very specific word when talking about Usha. She said she confronted Usha Vance.
confronted Usha Vance. I held her hand and I told her, honestly, I do not know how I'm going to get through this. She told me something. She said, you know when you're on an airplane with your kids and it's the last 15 minutes of the flight, things are crazy. Kids are not cooperating, toys are flying everywhere and everyone's screaming. And you think to yourself, cannot wait for this flight to land. And it's 15 minutes before you land. She told me, you will get through these 15 minutes and the next 15 minutes after. Usha, I don't think you realized it that those words were exactly what I needed to hear.
Why would you use the word confronted when talking about someone who supported you? That word means tension. It means conflict. It doesn't mean comfort. So what really happened between Erika and Usha on that plane ride? What was said that Erika later called a confrontation? Some people say that when you go through trauma with someone, you form a deep bond. They call it a trauma bond. And maybe that's what happened here. Maybe Erika and Usha became close because they both went through something horrible together. But trauma bonds don't explain why Erika would then turn around and compare JD Vance to her dead husband. They don't explain that hug. And they definitely don't explain what's happening now, with JD publicly humiliating Usha. I don't know what was said on that plane, but I do know that Usha's face in that photo tells us she's worried. And based on what JD has been saying recently, she should be. So here's where the conspiracy gets real. Someone on TikTok wrote a comment that went absolutely viral. They said, he's gonna divorce Usha for not being Christian. Get with Erika, say it's what Charlie would have wanted, then they're gonna use the new ballroom for the wedding. At first, people thought this was just a joke, but then they started looking at the timeline and it all started making sense. Laura Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, recently said that after Trump's term ends, JD Vance will be the next president. She said he'll lead the country for 8 years. So we're talking about a 2028 presidential run for JD Vance. That's already being set up. Now, if you're running for president in 2028, you need the perfect image. You need a wife who fits the conservative Christian base. Someone who's strong, faithful, and already has a following. Someone like Erika Kirk. Erika is everything JD's current wife isn't in the eyes of the MAGA base. She's white, she's Christian, she's a widow of a conservative hero, and she's already proven she can lead an organization. She's the perfect political partner. So the theory goes like this. JD will find a reason to divorce Usha. Maybe he'll say she refused to convert to Christianity. Maybe he'll say they grew apart. Whatever the reason, he'll make it look justified. Then, after a respectful amount of time, he'll marry Erika Kirk. They'll say it's what Charlie would have wanted. They'll say it's two people who bonded through tragedy finding love again. And then JD will run for president in 2028 with Erika Kirk as the perfect first lady candidate. Sounds crazy, right? But when you look at what's already happening, it doesn't seem so impossible anymore. Let's talk about what JD Vance has been doing to his wife recently, because this is where the theory really starts to make sense. JD Vance recently gave a speech in front of 10,000 people where he talked about his wife's religion. He said, "My wife did not grow up Christian. I think it's fair to say that she grew up in a Hindu family, but not in a particularly religious family. First of all, that's a lie. Usha herself has said that her parents are Hindu and that their faith made them good parents. She's talked about growing up in a religious household. So why is JD now trying to make it sound like Usha's family wasn't really religious? Why is he downplaying her Hindu background?" Then he said something even worse. He said, "Do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved by in church? Yeah, I do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way." He said this publicly, in front of thousands of people. He basically told the world that his wife's religion isn't good enough, and that he's hoping she'll convert. That's not love, that's humiliation. And here's the thing that makes this even more suspicious. When JD married Usha, they had an interfaith wedding. A Hindu priest gave blessings at their ceremony. Usha has said that incorporating her faith into their wedding was very important to her. So JD was fine with Hinduism when he was marrying her, but now, suddenly, after that viral hug with Erika Kirk, he has a problem with it? The timing is too convenient. It's like he's setting up the excuse he'll need later. My wife refused to convert to Christianity, so we had irreconcilable differences. That's the story he's building. And there's even a Catholic loophole he could use. It's called Pauline privilege. Basically, if a Catholic person marries someone who isn't baptized Christian, they can dissolve that marriage and remarry in the church. Since Usha isn't Christian, JD could use this rule to end their marriage cleanly and then have a proper church wedding with someone else. someone like Erika Kirk. I'm not saying this is definitely what's happening, but I am saying that all the pieces are lining up perfectly for it to happen, and that's what has people worried. Now, Joe Rogan isn't someone who usually comments on political drama like this. He talks about comedy, fighting, podcasts, and weird news stories. But even he couldn't ignore what was happening with Erika Kirk and JD Vance. On a recent episode of his podcast, Rogan said something that made millions of people pause. He said, "Something is sus, and they don't know what's going on exactly."
According to the narrative. Now, let's be real clear. I don't necessarily think they know what's going on yet. There's a lot of weird going on with this.
I know.
That's it. He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly what he was talking about. He was talking about Erika Kirk, about JD Vance, about the hug, about the suspicious behavior since Charlie's death. When Joe Rogan says something is sus, people listen. His podcast reaches hundreds of millions of people, and when he questions something, his audience starts digging. They start investigating. They start asking the questions that mainstream media won't touch.
Rogan knows he has that power, and he used it here. He basically told the world, hey, look at this situation closer because something doesn't add up, and millions of people did exactly that. But Rogan didn't stop at questioning Erika's behavior. He also raised suspicions about Charlie Kirk's death itself, and this is where things get really dark. On his podcast, Rogan talked about the young man who shot Charlie. He asked questions that investigators should have been asking. How did a 20-year-old plan something this complicated? How did he get access? Why do so many details of the story not make sense? And most importantly, who really benefited from Charlie Kirk's death?
Said that he took it apart and then put it back together again. Shut the up. Do you know how much time it would take to do that if you were highly skilled?
To disassemble a gun.
To disassemble a rifle so that you can get it in a backpack. And by the way, not gonna fit.
Not gonna fit in a backpack.
And then somehow or another reconnects it once he gets off the roof. What? This story is horseshit. Like none of these things make any sense to me.
Rogan pointed out that the official story has too many holes. The weapon was supposedly a World War I rifle with no serial number. The shooter allegedly took it apart, smuggled it in, put it back together, shot Charlie, and then escaped, only to be caught later under mysterious circumstances. None of that makes sense, and when you look at who benefited from Charlie's death, one name keeps coming up: Erika Kirk. She went from being Charlie's wife to being the CEO of his entire organization. She went from being in the background to being the face of the conservative movement. She went from being unknown to being on stages with the Vice President of the United States. I'm not saying Erika had anything to do with Charlie's death, but I am saying that she's benefited more than anyone else from what happened. She's more powerful, more famous, and more connected now than she ever was when Charlie was alive. And that makes people ask uncomfortable questions. When you combine the suspicious circumstances of Charlie's death with Erika's rapid rise, with that hug, with JD's treatment of Usha, with the 2028 presidential timeline, it all starts to look like pieces of a bigger plan. A plan that Joe Rogan and millions of others are now watching very closely. So what do you think? Is this all just grief and coincidence? Or is Erika Kirk playing a much bigger game than anyone wants to admit? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I want to hear what you think about all of this.